Hi everyone, and welcome to the launch of Accelerate, our new initiative focused on championing disability inclusion globally, both in the workplace and wider society, which we're running in partnership with the wonderful Untapped. I'm Tom Litton-Dickey, the founder of Meaningful Business, and I'm looking forward to hosting you for this important conversation today as to why the UN Sustainable Development Goals can only truly succeed if disabled people are employed and empowered. We are fortunate to be joined today by an amazing group of disability champions from around the world. Our moderator will be Suzy Christopher, the co-founder of our partner Untapped, and she'll be joined by Bernard Chiira, the director of Innovate Now, alongside Vicky Austin, the co-founder and CEO of the Global Disability Innovation Hub. We invite you to ask as many questions as you can using the chat function throughout, and we'll endeavour to get through them in the Q&A session at the end. But without any further ado, I'm delighted to hand over to our moderator, Suzy Christopher. So over to you, Suzy.
Thank you, Tom. And I'm really delighted and excited to be moderating this Q&A today. This is the inaugural Accelerate event, and we're looking forward to bringing you more events, podcasts, articles, and other content over the next 12 months. But firstly, I'd like to now welcome our guests. So hi, Bernard. Hi, Victoria. For those who don't know, Bernard is based in Nairobi in Kenya. He is a purpose-driven innovation catalyst and disability inclusion champion. His real passion and his track record is supporting early stage startup founders in Kenya and beyond across Africa. And as director of Innovate Now, which is Africa's first assistive technology accelerator and innovation ecosystem, Bernard's doing some great work actually in partnership with the Global Disability Innovation Hub. So that leads me on to Vicky. Vicky Austin is a pioneer of social justice. She was part of the team actually leading the London Legacy Development Corporation's Paralympic Legacy Programme around the London 2012 Games. Based on that experience with her fellow co-founders, she then developed the concept and created the Global Disability Innovation Hub, known as GDI Hub. That was back in 2016. Basically, GDI Hub works in ecosystem partnerships to challenge through co-design, knowledge sharing, and creating solutions to some of the world's most pressing challenges for disabled people by disabled people. In her role as CEO of GDI Hub, Vicky leads the AT 2030 programme, AT standing for Assistive Technology, which is a Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office initiative which brings life-changing assistive technology to all. It's a 5-year programme supporting getting assistive technology solutions to scale by experimenting with new ideas and thinking across community-led, systems-focused and market-driven interventions. So I think I have two experts here today. We're really delighted to welcome you. To begin with, Vicky, I wonder if you could just let people know what Global Disability Innovation Hub does.
Sure, thanks for inviting me to be here today. It's wonderful to support your launch, and we're really excited to see more partners coming into the space of disability inclusion and disability innovation. We know that, for example, there are more than 900 million people around the world who need access to assistive technology, which is just one small part of the disability innovation jigsaw, but it goes some way to describing why it's so important that we all turn our attention to focus on disability inclusion and disability innovation, especially now, when we know that people who've been hardest hit by the current crisis are often people with disabilities themselves. I am, as you said, CEO of GDI Hub. GDI Hub was launched through the partnership that delivered the Legacy Programme from London 2012. And we were launched in Rio in 2016 to continue to drive forward that thinking on disability and to challenge the way that intractable long-term problems had been addressed in the past. So we don't think we have all the answers, but we do think the solutions lie in asking people who experience the problem on a day-to-day basis and helping to co-design solutions, often using technology. we're at a really special point in time where technology is kind of catching up and overtaking what we thought could have been possible. But oftentimes that technology is not being put to use to the world's most challenging problems. And so that's kind of why we set up, and that's what we do. Day to day, we run research programs, we run teaching and master's program out of UCL. We do programs to test what works, like the FCDO program you described. We're setting up innovation ecosystems around the world, including in Kenya, and Bernard can tell you more about that. And we advocate for change. So we're here to do ourselves out of a job, really. Over time, we'll be really pleased if we don't need to exist anymore. But in the meantime, we're operating in 35 countries, and our program is now at about 50 million.
The sin of being on mute, sorry about that. One of the reasons we're here today is to discuss disability inclusion and how important it is. And obviously the meaningful business community is made up of many purpose-led, purpose-driven organisations. I've got a stat here from the International Labour Organization. They released it last December, which said that disabled people are 2 times less likely to be employed than people without disabilities. So obviously this is a big issue, and organisations have got a role to play in creating change. Maybe Bernard, could I come to you and ask, can you tell us why you feel people with disabilities might be disproportionately negatively impacted by the world's biggest problems, and why it's so critical that we do something about this?
Thank you, Suzy. Yeah, I mean, it's about the barriers, isn't it? Because when you look at what let's call it a path to anything, a path to employment, a path to education, or a path to literally just getting across the street. So if you look at how our society has been designed and existed over the last maybe couple of centuries, and obviously in different parts of the world it's different, but what persons with disability find themselves into is having to tackle always 2 problems at the same time. You have to, get the qualifications like everyone else, but it doesn't stop there. For you, you have to figure out how to basically break glass ceilings or barriers that have been sometimes not designed on purpose, but I actually believe it's designed on ignorance sometimes, and lack of prioritizing this kind of inclusive thinking in the way we design society. So in the workplace, for example, one of the things that has been common in Kenya, and I believe in many African countries, is this, the first barrier you get is usually, a built environment barrier, because guess what? All the buildings were never designed with the thought that one day Bernard will turn up to look for a job on the 16th floor of a bank, and there is no lift. And unfortunately, this is a situation. So when you start to understand this from a barrier perspective, then you actually begin to understand why persons with disability are disproportionately disadvantaged when it comes to basically social and economic development. So some of these barriers could be what I mentioned: physical barriers, built environment barriers. But sometimes these barriers, and this is why it's so unfortunate, they are actually mindset barriers, or people having uninformed beliefs that just because someone has a disability, that they probably are not good at the job. And these are stereotypes that we are trying to break, and the way you do that is to actually challenge the barriers. That has been my life from the beginning, from as long as I can remember. I had to challenge them, and once people started seeing this going against the grain, then it became easier to break some of those barriers. So I think what we have to ask ourselves is, how might we amplify the efforts of persons with disability in breaking those barriers, in showing that they can actually excel and not just perform. Thank you.
That's excellent. And I'd like to bring Vicky in there, because obviously one of the roles of GDI Hub is to help scale and take individual experiences, as Bernard's been mentioning. And I know that some of your work does involve looking at stigma, where that occurs and where there are misconceptions that can create barriers. So could you talk a little bit about your work that you're doing there?
Sure. That was really well said, Bernard. I think it's interesting to kind of, it's important to remember that while it's significant to address high-tech solutions, also really low tech or attitudinal everyday barriers. I think people talk about everyday sexism. Well, let's talk about everyday ableism that just confronts many people, no matter what their impairment or long-term condition, on a regular basis. And I think, you know, I've seen disability offices that are on the 3rd floor that you have to get to sign for to become a disabled person to receive your welfare benefit. I've seen, you know, companies in the UK that, you know, just don't use simple alternative solutions. So I think, you know, there are many ways in which we can take easy action to deliver impactful change. And we can start by educating ourselves and our families about what disability means. And that does mean addressing stigma. It means having, you know, it means having a group of friends that represents more than people that are exactly the same as you, whether you have a disability or not. It means kind of thinking about the media you consume. One of our most impactful partnerships actually is with a group called Shujaz, who reached over 70% of Kenyan young people with their social media and their magazine. And we introduced a disabled character recently, and the disabled character is, there are a couple actually, but they're not kind of in the magazine or in the storyline to be a disabled person. They're in the storyline to be a farmer with excellent advice on how to make your seeds grow. And I think from our experience, it's these types of everyday interactions that make a real difference, and that can be the barrier between participation, which is fair and equal, and then feeling excluded. Because if we ask ourselves what disability justice really is, I think for me, at its very core, it's a parity of participation. It's being able to be a representative of your, you know, in your political establishment. It's being able to be, you know, a member of your community leadership team. It's being a faith community member. It's as well as being able to work and do the things that are economically productive. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, Suzy.
No, it does. Thank you very much. I'm actually keen, Bernard, to understand a little bit more, or for everybody here to understand more about Innovate Now, and what that is and what your role is there and what you're trying to achieve through Innovate Now.
Thank you, Suzy. So Innovate Now is really, it's Africa's first assistive technology accelerator. What that really means that this is the first time we are actually having a dedicated program that helps entrepreneurs that are building solutions to break some of the barriers I talked about with the support that they need to succeed at the earlier stages. And I'm going to say why this is important. One of the drivers of this access barrier to assistive technology in many countries is simply a lack of availability of assistive products and services. And that's because there aren't enough companies or solution providers at the local level that are actually meeting the needs, the assistive technology needs of those communities. And in the startup world, there is something we famously call the valley of death. And this is a phase when you're starting a company where you're spending more resources than resources coming in to help you understand what is the real problem and how do you go about solving it sustainably. Now, every company, every startup company all over the world goes through this stage. And some of the interventions that have been there to support these companies to thrive and to survive this stage is providing that early stage funding or early stage mentoring, or it could be even technical support to really help the entrepreneurs figure out and overcome that barrier. So in the assistive technology sector, and especially in Africa, in Kenya, there hasn't been a focus on supporting companies that are building assistive technology. And what we are literally trying to do is basically to test what works in helping assistive technology companies in emerging markets figure out how to actually survive this valley of death and actually be able to scale. So some of the support we give, for example, is we have an active learning curriculum that has been specifically designed with assistive technology, disability, and the whole ecosystem in mind to help them understand what are the barriers to market, what is the regulatory environment, and how do you navigate it, and how do you actually conduct deep human-centered design, which is absolutely required for assistive technology. And one of my favorite parts of our program is something we call the live labs. And this is essentially bringing proximity of disabled people and linking them with the innovators or entrepreneurs, so that whatever is being tested or designed is actually addressing the real problem. We also create opportunities for our assistive technology entrepreneurs to actually engage with the larger innovation ecosystem. And we are riding on a theme called inclusive innovation ecosystem, because we want to share our work with everyone in the world and for them to see how you can actually be inclusive in innovation. And lastly, we have a demo day where we showcase and we invite decision makers, stakeholders, investors to see the solutions that are coming out of emerging markets like Kenya. And I'm very proud that we've been able to support 15 startups in less than 2 years. And some of them have actually gone to proof that there can be business models that are worth testing, that are worth scaling for taking assistive technology products to market. So essentially, that is what we are doing with Innovate Now.
That's excellent. And Vicky, from your perspective as CEO of GDI Hub, obviously involved funding Innovate Now, why did you get involved? I'm guessing one of the things is understanding what works beyond Kenya and beyond Africa, but can you explain a little bit more about your views of Innovate Now?
Well, firstly, we met Bernard, so of course we wanted to invest in him and his ideas because he's awesome. But we have this kind of strong sense that innovation is a mechanism to address access in a way that hadn't been well explored. So I'm a social scientist, I'm not a technologist. So my background is very much in trying to understand how development challenges are solved. And we had a sense that by setting a mission, by understanding that our intention globally is to reduce the number of those 900 million people that don't have access to things like wheelchairs, hearing aids, eyeglasses that we need to participate in everyday life. And oftentimes this grant funding solution is necessary, but we had a sense that there was bubbling entrepreneurship, both by disabled people and by non-disabled entrepreneurs who were interested in coming into the space. And so we wanted to test it, and Kenya is the perfect place to do that, because I don't know if anyone's been or lives in Nairobi, but that's where it's at. That's where the technology is taking over. That's where, new smart city district being built. You've got entrepreneurs, and when we went and mapped, we found 47 ecosystems already, none of which were addressing assistive technology. So that seemed really important to us. But no, it's not the only place. I mean, we work on a project that's more Africa focused, that Bernard will talk about later, the Impact Fund, and that's got a lot of tech coming out of East Africa, West Africa too, and there's a lot going on in India, but also at home in East London, we've been working with our partners Plexel, Loughborough, University College London, to support ecosystem innovators there with the global, with the local and inclusive ecosystem too. And I think, so my colleague Kathy Holloway, who set up GDI with me, she's a professor at UCL, has just right now finishing a paper for the World Health Organization for the Assistive Technology World Report that's coming out next year on innovation. I'm going to give you a tease. What it says, what we found, is that when sectors develop their innovation capacity, for example, pharmaceuticals or other healthcare tech, they use a kind of open innovation framework where startups can get into the ecosystem, they can partner with corporates and ideas come through the process. In assistive technology, that's not happening as far as we can tell or as far as we can see. And so it's not just because there aren't the right technologies. Like oftentimes we think if we invent the next smart cane, then everything will be solved. Not true. The problem is that we need a whole ecosystem. We need supporting ecosystems. We need corporates who know how to bring in smaller companies. We need governments who know what to buy and how to buy and can buy in bulk. We need a global marketplace that understands the need for assistive technology and can help map that. So we've done country capacity assessments in 10 countries on assistive technology with the World Health Organization and Clinton Health Access team. And we've also put in place a set of policy narratives or product narratives which touch on each of the wheelchairs, hearing aids, eyeglasses, which set out what the global picture looks like so we can attract investment in. And Bernard can talk more about ATIF maybe.
Yeah, but Bernard, why don't you do that? Tell us, what is ATIF?
Yeah, so ATIF is the Assistive Technology Impact Fund. It's a global fund and it's the first one ever focusing on trying to answer this question: how might you scale assistive technology solutions that have a proven business model? Because when you look at the impact that's needed in this sector, I mean, we are talking about only 1 in 10 people globally, and that's like 1 billion people. And obviously the need is much more dire in the global south. So the ATIF wants to show, and within a very short time, because sometimes what happens is that when you go to funders and you tell them it's going to take 20 years to show results, you're not going to get funded. We want to be agile and we want to show that there is innovative solutions, new ways, new approaches of taking assistive technology to market. So this fund, and it's initially funded by, we got our seed money from FCDO, £4 million to be precise. It is gonna invest over the next couple of years in at least 8 scale-ups in the assistive technology space. And as we do that, we are also building the case. So we wanna enlarge or increase that investment, so that we can literally build a pipeline of new solutions and help them scale across the continent. Why this fund is pretty unique and also I believe is going to be impactful is also because it's not just money. We are bringing venture building support. So what we've heard from our entrepreneurs is that a lot of the times they need more than the money. They need to figure out how do you navigate some of the barriers, like regulatory barriers. How do you ensure you've done clinical trials that prove result that your product actually meets the standards. And we are looking at financing solutions. We are looking at assistive technology solutions that actually reduce the cost of assistive devices, because that has been one of the biggest barriers, especially in emerging markets. And we're also looking at how do we ensure that these solutions can be sustainably produced and actually be long term in the markets that they go into. So this fund is bringing together experts. So it's we are working with a couple of partners to ensure that this fund actually works. And I don't know whether Vicky, you want to mention some of these awesome partners, but we actually believe that it's also going to test out a new model of scaling financing of assistive technology in Africa.
Yeah, you're right. We're working with Brink in the UK, an innovation agency that works globally, and also the Catalyst Fund, who invest in fintech products and have been massively successful over the past 10 years. And also the first two funded items are HearX, which is a new type of hearing aid out of South Africa, and WaziVision, which is a recycled, lower cost spectacle out of Uganda. So we're excited to see what happens there.
Great. I could talk to you all afternoon, but I'm very mindful of time. So we're coming to the sort of close of, I guess, this part of the Q&A. We're about to open up. I think there've been a few questions coming through the chat, but I just want to ask you both one final question. Obviously, Meaningful Business is a community of organisations, including startups and social enterprises, ranging through to large multinationals. So what piece of advice would you give to a business anywhere about disability inclusion and action they could take?
I don't know if you want to go first. And it relates to the question in the chat. So equality or diversity are the right thing to do. There's lots of reasons why you should care about it. We can't deliver our sustainable development goals, blah, 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 blah. Also, 2 billion people, for example, will need assistive technology by 2050. It's a massive market. If you're living or working in Asia, it's very difficult to think about designing any kind of policy or program without factoring in an aging society. Post-COVID, people are living in different ways. So I think if you don't feel that you have good knowledge, seek to educate yourself about disability and then operate with integrity. Like, I have had no idea what I was doing for lots of the last 5 years, but with the right questions asked to the right partners and a sort of like set of values that drive through our approach, we've done the best thing that we could do at the time. And therefore, if someone wanted to criticize and say, well, you haven't done this, or you haven't done Z, or you haven't done Y, I would say, no, but we did what we felt was the best thing at the time, which is much better than doing nothing, because you're fearful of being criticized for not doing X, Y, and Z. So ask people if you don't know, or learn, and operate from your heart with integrity.
Great. And now over to you, Bernard, for your thoughts on that. What advice would you give to a business if they haven't thought about disability inclusion before?
Yeah, I think I'd give them two pieces of advice. One is that when you think about people, people are about potential. And because of being systemically excluded for a very long time, the potential with persons with disability has not been, leveraged. And this is a huge opportunity. Every company, every business is looking for talent. And we are awesomely gifted at many things. And there's this sense of purpose as well, because we don't get too many chances. So when we get chances, we deliver. The other piece of advice would be, there is actually an opportunity now to look at inclusion, not only from a social good perspective, but actually from a business return perspective. And it's been actually proven, there is research actually from ILO and many other organizations that show the economic return on disability inclusion. So it's actually good for business. And if you want to check this, most of the big tech companies that rake in billions in profits every year are big, extremely huge on inclusion. So those would be my two pieces of advice.
Thank you very much. I'm now delighted to introduce my Untapped co-founder Anna Parisi, who's been monitoring the chat and looking at all the questions. So Anna, over to you for this next section.
Hi there, thanks Suzy. That was a great discussion, and now we're going to test my multitasking skills in monitoring the chat as the questions come in thick and fast. So just to start off, we have a question from Ian Martin. Hello, Ian. In a commercially driven world, how do we overcome the perception that inclusion is an expense to a business as opposed to bringing diversity and potential customers to the organisation? I think you've touched on that a little bit in your wrapping up, Bernard, but maybe Vicky, you want to add something to that.
I'll just build on what Bernard says. Take a look at Microsoft. Take a look at what Microsoft are doing. They have a chief accessibility officer, and they are building accessibility into their mainstream product lines. Why are they doing that? Well, they're doing it because Jenny Lay-Fleury is a really charismatic leader, and they're doing it because, you know, having a job title like accessibility evangelist is a great thing, but they're also doing it because it's good for their bottom line. It makes sense for them to have products that more people can use. 2 out of 7 billion people will be older by 2050. So it's not really a sideline issue. I mean, in a city like London, where I worked, it's 20% of the population are people with disabilities or disabled people, as we would say in the UK. And so this isn't a small group of people. Also, have you ever worked in a team where everyone's the same and you're group thinking ideas? And was it successful? Because I'm willing to bet that those teams that have got more diverse perspectives are more likely to come up with the best, most commercially impactful outcomes.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. You know, many of the members of the Meaningful Business are purpose-led organisations, and many people on the call are running and working in purpose-led organisations, or purpose is very important to them. One area is education, and we know that lack of education is definitely, you know, a huge barrier. Can you talk about organisations that are focused on addressing the challenge of education and what more they can be doing to be inclusive? Maybe start with Bernard.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, education is really at the heart of all issues in society. And one of the things I know for sure is that, at least from a Kenyan perspective, if you go and look into the curriculum across, you know, kindergarten to, you know, secondary school, there isn't anything taught on diversity and inclusion, and especially around disability. And I think we have an opportunity here to look at how do we evolve our education systems so that we are actually creating or building a society that is actually enlightened. Remember, the stigma piece is one of the biggest barriers for persons with disability to thrive. And I think you can't begin quite enough long-term ending that if you don't address it within the education system. The other piece I wanted to touch on is because I have seen, you know, how, for example, in Kenya, our education system has evolved. I think our system has changed maybe 3-4 times over the last 3 decades, and that is good. But when it comes to the issue of education, special education, as they call it, we haven't seen a lot of progress in that space. But I have seen companies doing amazing things. One of our partners that is running our Live Labs program, she provides digital braille readers to schools, to young children for free, and is trying to work with government to actually show them that, you know, blind children today have a better chance because of the evolution of technology. There's no need for bulky old braille machines that have 100 parts that could break down. And this is some of the thinking that we need. How do we support, the education system with access to assistive devices so that learners with disability can thrive? Thank you.
Thanks, Bernard. Vicky, anything to add quickly?
Really quick. We're working actually on a scoping report for the World Bank at the moment, and there's loads of new partners entering this space, like the Education Alliance and people looking at tech for inclusive ed tech. Oftentimes we find a systemic problem and then we look at an individual child-based solution. So this child needs this piece of technology. And actually the solution might be better addressed as, how does this government need to address training its teachers? And I think COVID, that's just an example. And I think COVID's given us an opportunity, because now we know many, many children have been out of education this year, not just disabled children, but actually many, many children. And so it's our chance, isn't it, to get really good at this, really good at inclusive education. And if we fail to do it now with the technology that's available to us, then we just haven't tried hard enough. I also had an answer on the education resources that was asked in the chat, but I can probably just type it.
Yeah, so now we have got 3 minutes left and 3 questions. So it's now for the time for the quickfire round. So this question is to Vicky from Ken Ross. Hi, Ken. Do you think that there needs to be more to highlight that the Equality Act exists and employers clearly are ignoring this on a huge scale, which is so evident in the poor employment numbers?
I don't think people are ignoring the Equality Act. Firstly, it would only apply in the UK, although there's similar legislation, including international legislation that guides aid. It's my understanding and belief that people don't know how to operate it in their current context. So they need better advice and guidance on how to make it practical and usable in their context in a way that doesn't kill their bottom line. And that's the bit that's missing. It's not that people don't understand, it's that they don't know how to operate it.
Okay, thanks, Vicky. Nice, succinct answer there. Bernard, your quickfire question. Is there specific national legislation in Kenya to promote inclusion, to bring about acceptance and practice by government, corporate and private sectors? That's probably really unfair to ask you to answer that quickly, but if you could, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm gonna try. So in Kenya, we have the Disability Act of 2003. So this is a piece of legislation that actually talks about how you actually within the law actually enforce the rights of persons with disability. So that is there. Also in 2010, Kenya changed her constitution, and in these new constitutions, there are clauses that are entrenched in the constitution against discrimination of persons with disability. So we do have legislation. The problem is the implementation or enforcement of the legislation, because at some point it actually clashes with other legislation. For example, in the built environment, the construction law talks about nothing on accessible buildings, but you have a piece of law that says every new building needs to have a lift if it goes beyond 4 floors. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Bernard. I'm just going to wrap up now. There are a lot of questions. There's lots of comment in the chat. And we have one final question, which I'm going to ask Vicky and Bernard to answer with one thing. What podcasts, documentaries, books, etc. do you suggest we utilise to educate ourselves on disabled people and disability inclusion? I'm quickly going to say that the purpose of today's event is to launch Accelerate and is to launch the Meaningful Business channel on this topic. So there's going to be lots of content there. So I encourage you all to join that. And what we will absolutely do is the questions that haven't been answered, we will endeavour to answer within that channel and provide resources. And then there's a number of people who've provided comment on stuff that they are doing in this space that we haven't had time to address here. So I'd like to thank you all for adding that, and absolutely in that channel we will highlight the projects that you're working on and the work that you're doing, so that everybody who's been in this discussion can learn about what you're doing as well. So one very quick one, Vicky, what podcast, documentary, book?
Well, Suzy's podcast, obviously, but Oscar nominated Crip Camp on Netflix, which is, I think, the first time that a film about disability with the amazing Judy Heumann, who was Obama's advisor and continues to be a great leader in the space globally, in it. And it's also a slightly less traditional take on disability history.
Great, thanks, Vicky. I've seen that. It's a great recommendation. And Bernard?
Rising Phoenix too.
I was gonna say that. Yeah.
You get another one, seeing as she took one of yours.
Rising Phoenix, obviously for me, is my one. I mean, it's you see the potential when you really get to understand when you watch that one. But we also have a podcast, don't we, Vicky, that Julia has been leading. I'm trying to remember.
Innovation Action.
Yes, Innovation Action podcast. So we will continue kind of making these recommendations, hopefully in this year-long content campaign. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you. And back to Suzy.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I honestly could carry on this conversation, and it's brilliant to see so much interaction in the chat. So just to reiterate what Anna said, please do join the Accelerate community, and we will let you know about forthcoming events, and we will continue to share content there as well. I think for me, just to say thank you to Bernard and Vicky for your time today. I think it's been a really fascinating discussion, and for me, I think I have sort of two key takeaways I think everybody could start doing today. One is please tackle everyday ableism, and let's, you know, when we see that, call it out, and let's try to be advocates. I think that's something everybody can do, no matter where you are in the world and what your role in workplace or society is. And the other thing is Bernard's point about that economic return. Disability inclusion isn't nice to do, it makes sound business sense. So as a purposeful, meaningful business community, this group should really be leading the charge and helping other organisations see the benefits of that. So thank you. And now I'm going to hand back over to Tom to wrap up.
Thank you, Suzy. And I mean, just the only thing I need to say is thank you to all of you. So Bernard, Vicky, that was brilliant. Anna, thank you for that as well. And as you both said, we're going to be continuing this conversation throughout the year. So there'll be content, there'll be more activities, there's events, and everybody here is very, very welcome. Lee just put in the chat, we'll be sending the recording out of this session in the next few days, so look out for that. But enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe. Thanks for joining.